Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari
Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari
Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradhari
Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradhari
Yashodanandana Praja Jana Ranjana
Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana
Yashodanandana Praja Jana Ranjana
Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana
Yamuna Tira Vanachari
Yamuna Tira Vanachari
Yamuna Tira Vanachari
Yamuna Tira Vanachari
Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari
Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
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 Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2. We are on text 13. 1, 2, 13. Atah pumpirddvedshreshtha varnashrama vibhagashah svanushtatasya dharmasya samsiddhirharitoshanam. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Jai.
Translation. O best among the twice born, it is therefore concluded that the highest perfection one can achieve by discharging the duties prescribed for one's own occupation, according to caste divisions and orders of life, is to please the personality of Godhead. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Human society all over the world is divided into 4 castes and 4 orders of life. The 4 castes are the intelligent caste, the martial caste, the productive caste, and the laborer caste. These castes are classified in terms of one's work and qualification and not by birth. Then again, there are 4 orders of life, namely the student life, the householder's life, the retired, and the devotional life. In the best interest of human society, there must be such divisions of life. Otherwise, no social institution can grow in a healthy state. And in each and every one of the above-mentioned divisions of life, the aim must be to please the supreme authority of the personality of Godhead. That part was in italics, which means emphasis. The aim must be to please the supreme authority of the personality of Godhead. This institutional function of human society is known as the system of varnashrama dharma, which is quite natural for the civilized life. The varnashrama institution is constructed to enable one to realize the absolute truth. It is not for artificial domination of one division over another. When the aim of life, i.e. realization of the absolute truth, is missed by too much attachment for indriya priti or sense gratification, as already discussed herein before, the institution of the varnashrama is utilized by selfish men to pose an artificial predominance over the weaker section. In the Kali Yuga, or in the age of quarrel, this artificial predominance is already current, but the saner section of the people know it well that the divisions of castes and orders of life are meant for smooth social intercourse and high-thinking self-realization, and not for any other purpose. Herein the statement of Bhagavatam is that the highest aim of life, or the highest perfection of the institution of the varnashrama dharma, is to cooperate jointly for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. This is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 4:13. Omagyanativirantasya jnananjanashlakaya chakshurmilitam yena tasmai shri gurave namaha. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Gaur Premanande, Hare Bol. O best among the twice born, it is therefore concluded that the highest perfection one can achieve by discharging the duties prescribed for one's own occupation, according to caste divisions and orders of life, is to please the personality of Godhead. It's one of those therefore verses. It's building on the case that's been established before. Because such and such, therefore this. So the therefore is that the highest perfection, the best purpose of any of your daily activities and your occupational duties is to please the Lord, actually, haritoshana, to satisfy the Lord. And that's based on the previous conclusions that there's a way in which the process of inquiring, even just inquiring about the Supreme, is the best kind of question, the best kind of questions and answers. And that's what actually satisfies. This earlier in the chapter was established, that's the only thing that truly satisfies the self. And we've established that absolute truth is understood as Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan, and that the inquisitive sage, the successful spiritual practitioner, they practice Bhakti Yoga. They approach Bhagavan. They practice Bhakti Yoga in terms of what they've heard from Shastra. So having established all that, having talked about spiritual life and what the goal of spiritual life is, and how to approach the Supreme Person, and how the Supreme Person is not different from Paramatma, Lord in the heart, and Brahman, the impersonal aspect, but that actually Bhakti is the highest and approaching the Supreme, and then this is done through Shastra. Okay, so now what do I do today? What do I do about my life, my normal life, regular life, mundane life, material life? What about my job? What about all that? So the verse here is saying the highest perfection you can achieve by discharging your duties according to your occupation is to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So to that end, Prabhupada talks a little bit in passing about the Varnashrama system, what's called the caste system. This is another loaded term that Prabhupada has to, and he does, make sure we don't misunderstand. The term caste system is used usually in this day and age as referring to what became of the Varnashrama dharma, because as Prabhupada put it, the institution of Varnashrama is utilized by selfish people to pose an artificial predominance over the weaker section. So, as Prabhupada points out, Krishna himself mentions this aspect of the social life of the human being. In 4.13 Bhagavad Gita, Chaturvarnam maya sishtam guna karma vibhagashaha tasya kartaram apimam vitti kartaram avyayam. That by me, from me, these four divisions of human life in terms of varna and ashrama are manifested. This is always the case, that people are born and they have certain qualities and they get trained, and by their training they also develop certain qualities, that there's always a way in which they plug in to society. That's what varnashrama, that's what caste system means. You plug into society. You don't opt out of society, you plug in. And how do you plug in? You plug in according to your guna and your karma. Guna karma vibhagashaha is the first statement in Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada says the same thing. Guna karma means your qualities and your activities. He says that literally here. These castes are classified in terms of one's work and qualification. Qualification is guna, karma is work, and not by birth. It's not that because you're born in a certain family, that's who you are. That's a kind of fatalistic idea. It's shortcutting. What we find is that if there's a really well-developed varnashrama system, people generally will tend to have the same qualities as their parents and their own communities and who they are surrounded by, because that's also what they happen to be trained in generally. But that's generally, that's not necessarily always the case. Everybody has, I guess in the modern terms you can call it like upward mobility or downward mobility for that matter. The point is lateral mobility. The point is it's not a power structure. It's not meant to actually create rigidity. It's not by birth. And there are so many examples of this in Shastra and in recorded history of people who are in this particular family and then they had this inclination and they developed in the way that they're inclined and they become very good at that. The point is to plug in. You know, it's a natural system so that people aren't, among other things, if we recognize the nature of varnashrama, as Krishna says, it's coming from me. This is the nature of things. Don't deny it. Work with it. Don't work against it. Then you understand it as a current flowing. You don't try to swim against it. Which means, for example, you have children. You don't force them to do something that you think is good for them when they're not really good at it. They don't love it. It's not what they want to do. Simple understanding of this is you take any child, even one of a pair of identical twins, and each one of those children, from a young age, if you leave them alone and you tell them they have some free time to do whatever they want, they'll do something according to their nature. Some will pick up a book and read it and gather knowledge. Others will organize people and create structure. Mm-hmm. Others will create little merchant games and create gaining and loss and these kinds of things. Others will go into arts and crafts, and it's just the nature of the living entity. They're just at one time or another, in one lifetime or another, more inclined to one kind of way than another of operating with the material energy. And that indicates what they can be very good at, what they like to do. And the good news is the world needs all those things. The world needs craftspeople, it needs merchants, it needs leaders and organizers of people, it needs people who are into knowledge and protecting knowledge. That's what varnashrama is, that's all it is. In fact, one way of understanding it is it's just different ways of protecting. Brahmanas protect knowledge, Kshatriyas protect people, Vaishyas protect the natural world and resources, especially cows and edible food matter for humans. And Shudras protect the arts and crafts. And you take any one of those out of society and it's not a proper society anymore. That's what Prabhupada says. They're meant for smooth social intercourse and high thinking self-realization. That what it means is we need all those things. Can you imagine a society without arts and crafts?
Nope.
You know, can you imagine like you don't have enough to eat, you don't have farmers? This is just inhuman. You don't have like organization leaders that are actually guided by teachers. You don't have teachers themselves. You don't have a system where all these other orders of life are guided by those who are the most renounced and the most in touch with spiritual truth. It doesn't work. And so if you have that, you have smooth social intercourse. Everybody just naturally plugs into what they want to do, what they're good at. They get trained in it. They're identified from an early age. You're good at this, or you're a mix and you can figure it out, or whatever. And you go on with the second half, high thinking self-realization. Because what happens is, if you don't have to waste so much time trying to figure out how to make a living, how to be satisfied materially, how to have some sense of self-expression in the world, you can go back to what's really natural for the soul. Because actually, as this verse points out, you're not going to be totally satisfied working the world anyway. That's not what the living entity is all about. The highest perfection one can achieve by discharging any of these duties, no matter what your varna or your ashram, is to satisfy the Lord. So one can plug into what they're natural at, and then one can connect that. And the good news is, even if you're doing something you're not natural at, something you don't love, something that wasn't necessarily identified for you from an early age, but just whatever you got to do to make a living, you can still satisfy the Lord. Because, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur points out, we have our material life and we have our spiritual life. And ultimately, we're spiritual beings having a material experience, but still we have these material aspects, including our work and occupation. And so there's this yoga process. Make your work satisfying, which means take what you earn at work and apply it. Apply your knowledge that you get from work. Apply your skills. Apply your money. Apply your time. Apply your know-how. Apply your workplace. Bring prasad to work. And don't work to get, work to give. You're working to give yourself and your family, your dependents, the opportunity to practice the spiritual life and achieve the perfection of human life, which means having a roof over your head, which means having food in your belly. And that roof over your head can be the roof of a temple. Treat your house like Krishna's house, and yourself as its custodian. Treat the food that comes in your house as for Krishna's pleasure, and take the remnants as prasad. And in this way, all the different material aspects of one's life, including one's job, they're just things that one does as a function of one's relationship with Krishna, right? And if when one goes to work, then it's like, yes, this is part of my service to Krishna. It's part of my service to my worshipful Lord, my Lord of my house, Lord of my heart. And we can feel that when we do that, in that consciousness, it becomes spiritualized, it becomes bhaktified. And that's very satisfying to the Lord, and it's very satisfying to oneself. Otherwise, what happens is that it's only indirectly satisfying to the Lord, inasmuch as you can say that the leader of your country or city, they're very, very happy to see that you're following the laws of the land. You're not running any red lights, you're not going and starting any fights, you're not shooting anybody up. It's like, yeah, that's satisfying, but they don't necessarily know you by name. They don't necessarily have any great feeling for you, but yeah, they're a law-abiding person. That's nice. That's good. They're not creating trouble for other people. They're plugging in. That's nice. It's nice to plug in. There's some sense of satisfaction, because indirectly, it satisfies Krishna. He wants there to be a functional human society, and you're doing your part. Mm-hmm. And what's really satisfying is that he sees you're trying to turn to him. And that's what allows for there to be such satisfaction for ourselves in our bhakti process, because we're dependent on him. We're downstream of him. When he's satisfied, we're like, oh wow, why do I feel this way when I chant Hare Krishna? Well, actually, because Hari Toshana, because you've satisfied the Supreme Lord. You've watered the root of the tree, and now the whole tree is feeling the results. So this verse is talking about this natural order of applying whatever one has, whatever one is doing, whatever one is materially. I am a man, I am this, I am a janitor, I am a teacher, whatever you are materially, whatever you do for Krishna. And then you become satisfied by that. And that's the way you'll become fully satisfied by those activities, is by having them be in relationship to Krishna. Otherwise, it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't actually matter, it won't satisfy. And that's the great trap of material life. The idea that, oh, if I only made more money, if I were only in that person's position, if I were only on top of the food chain, if I were only the president of the United States, if I were only the president of the company, if I were only independently wealthy and I could opt out of the whole thing, then I'd be happy. No, you'll never be happy as long as you haven't addressed Haritoshana, satisfying the Lord, applying yourself and connecting yourself, serving the Lord. That's what matters. And if you can, try to do something that's according to your nature. That's good. You'll save some time and energy, not having to do things that are at least completely contrary to your nature. However, Srila Prabhupada points out that devotees should be expert in somehow or other making a living. He doesn't actually make such a big deal out of doing exactly what you're inclined to do, exactly what your nature is. Partly because it's not necessarily practical. And partly because we all have mixed natures anyway in Kali Yuga. In order for a very clear nature to be fully developed, there should really be training for multiple generations. There should be a whole intact structure to support that. You should be knowing this from an early age. You know, you're raised in that mood. You're developed in that. And you're inclined to it. And that conjunction can create a real clarity of purpose. Like, I'm definitely this and not other things. What we find is that a lot of people are like, I'm some of this and I'm some of that. That's okay, because it was never going to be that if you just did that and you're all about that, then you're going to be satisfied anyway. You know, we can't say that Mozart died a fully satisfied person because he did what he was inclined to from an early age and what he was great at. We can't say that. We cannot say that at the spiritual level that was true. We cannot say that the person who plugged in as a Shudra or Vaishya or Kshatriya or Brahmana is naturally satisfied until and unless whatever they're doing is connected to Krishna. So the primary thing is connected to Krishna. The secondary thing is, if you can, try to find what you're good at and what your nature is. And what I will offer is that, as one would expect philosophically, the secondary thing doesn't happen before the first. Generally, it follows the first. What we find is that when devotees start to chant Hare Krishna, take up the primary practices, then they'll start to take up secondary practices of bhakti. I mean, they'll start to take care of deities or have pictures of deities in their home and pray. Then they start to engage in organizing their life around that, waking up at a certain time and going to bed and regulating around their practice of Hare Krishna chanting and kirtan and serving the devotees and deities, and this is a holy place I'm living in, like that, offering the food. And then they start to realize their material identities. Because they've realized they're spiritual, they realize they're material. It's interesting. People want to know, like, what am I supposed to do in this world? But they don't actually ask the right question. The right question is, who am I ultimately, beyond this world and in this world? And when one starts to address that by chanting, by practicing bhakti, by organizing one's life around that, what we find is that they start to have the secondary question answered in due course of time. What am I good at in this world? Oh, well, it becomes actually a drama-free question, a drama-free answer. Well, I'm actually kind of good at that. I like it. And sometimes it's what you already kind of knew, and sometimes it isn't. I didn't know I liked giving class. I didn't know I liked knowledge. I mean, I knew I liked books, but I didn't understand that this is a natural way to plug in, is that some people are just inclined to knowledge, and you should really focus then, if you're that way, on protecting knowledge and being very careful to preserve it. And whether it's spiritual knowledge or you teach kids or you teach adults, it doesn't so much matter. That's your nature. You'll only be materially satisfied if you're doing that. I didn't know that about myself until a couple of years of chanting Hare Krishna. And then it was like as obvious as the nose on my face. Everybody could see, and I could see, well, of course I should be teaching. And so I started teaching Shastra. And if I didn't become a brahmachari, I probably would have gotten a job in the world teaching and used that to make a living and continue my practice and on that basis. But that didn't happen. That clarity didn't come until I identified clearly as a devotee and tried to practice my life in that way. And so in this way we see that our identities become clear from the inside out. I'm first and foremost a servant of Krishna, and this is what I like to do. This is what I'm good at. This is what I'm attached to in this life, right? We're attached to certain things. You can ask yourself what you're attached to. What opulences are you attached to, right? Like, you can see that there's different primary opulences of the Lord. Knowledge, renunciation, beauty, wealth, strength, and what's the last one? Knowledge, renunciation, beauty, wealth, strength.
Power.
That's strength, yeah. Anyway, not coming to me. You can look it up. Google up 6 opulences of.
He said knowledge.
Yeah, and so if you're attached to beauty, okay, well, what aspect of beauty do you want to be? Like a painter? Do you want to be like something around clothes? Like, is that really where you're attached? You know, okay, so then you can do that.
Fame.
Yeah. So that's a hint. What do you do in your spare time? What do you love to do? What did you do when you were a kid? That's a hint. And if it's not immediately obvious, it's okay. Practice bhakti. It'll become obvious. Even if the answer is, you're kind of good at a lot of things. and you're maybe a jack of all trades, master of none. That's okay. Doesn't matter. You'll be satisfied by applying whatever you do in Krishna service anyway. And so this verse, to summarize, is talking about, it's a therefore verse, is building on the case that's established previously. Because the only thing that's going to really satisfy is spiritual life, and because that spiritual life is best acted on in terms of Bhagavan and Bhakti Yoga, therefore, even one's material life should be for the satisfaction of the Lord, and that's the most satisfying form of material occupation. And we talked about what the Varnashrama is, how it's natural. It's natural to find in any society that kids have a nature, humans have a nature, and that society requires these different types of activities and different orders of life. I didn't even talk about that. That means like the life of a student, one who's just gathering knowledge and is a humble servant, the life of somebody who is in the stage of, okay, now I'm like, I've got my training, and now I partner up, and maybe I have kids, and I work, grihasta, and then you become more renounced, and then you become completely renounced. So those stages of spiritual development alongside the stages of material, not stages, but different types of material engagement, Shudra, Vaishya, Kshatriya, Brahmana. And then ultimately, that's just meant for society to function smoothly, for there to be efficiency, for there to be material happiness and material plenitude. Enough farmers means enough food, enough Shudras means enough arts, enough Kshatriyas well trained means that everybody is guided properly and protected. As the Brahmins are there actually guiding the Kshatriyas, then everybody's orienting themselves properly, why they're even doing what they're doing ultimately, which is the verse is saying that ultimately you want to satisfy the Lord, and you can do that by turning whatever you have, your material identity, over and having it be yukta, having it be yoga connected to your spiritual identity. We talked a bit about how to do that, what that looks like in terms of time, energy, money, inclination, so forth, and how that really becomes clear, even one's material identity becomes clear by practice of spiritual life, by practice of Bhakti Yoga. So now we'll take any comments, questions, reflections. This is one of the kind of perennial questions, like what am I supposed to do, what am I good at? And hopefully we were able to offer some clarity around that, and how actually the real question is, who am I spiritually? And when we try to answer that, then the material thing comes in context, in the right context. We don't put the cart before the horse. Sometimes people think, oh, if I was just had the perfect job, and then I'd be happy. It's like, well, no. You can look around. There are people who are doing what they're great at. And on the spiritual level, they may or may not be actually truly connected. And that's independent, actually, of one's material situation, which is good news, because the material situation is coming and going. You will have to leave your job one day or another. You will never leave your occupation as a servant of Krishna. That's eternal. Om Tat Sat.
Om Tat Sat.
Okay, what did you hear?
Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
I was having a conversation with a devotee yesterday, and it was making me think about a question that might be helpful is, can you chat or say or speak or whatever a little bit to how we're meant to learn from each varnam, how we're meant to learn from each ashram, how we're meant to navigate this world together?
Yeah. Well, in order for there to be a intact material human experience, you need to have all the different things of the ashramas, the four varnas. Are you talking about varnas or ashrams? The four varnas means like
Mostly varna.
varnas, yeah. So the Shudras, Vaishyas, Kshatriyas, and Brahmanas, right? As varnas. Okay.
Yeah.
So what they provide is necessary for everybody, and you can understand that. You can understand that if we think about, like I took it to the extreme and said, what if there was a society with no arts and crafts, nobody willing to do the Shudra work? It doesn't work. It's not even satisfying. And ultimately the lesson is interdependence, and ultimately the lesson of interdependence is dependence on Krishna, right? Because that's a fact. Nobody's independent. Nobody, no matter how materially developed they are. Even materially, just to have a material successful life, you have to have parents or caregivers. You have to. There's no question of it. We can try to artificially say like, well, I don't need my parents. I don't need a partner. Or I don't need work. Or I don't. It's like we can try to do that. That's all modern thinking. That's all just trying to create a safe space for the living entity to exist independently on the ego basis. It doesn't work. We can't even breathe without being maintained. We have to have oxygen-rich environment. You have to have food. Prabhupada points out we've created all of these structures for massive industrial production, but you can't eat plastic. You have to have food. For there to be food, you have to have rain. You have to have people who tend the earth. And so there's a way in which, in an intact structure of human society, we appreciate everybody's contributions, even if we don't understand them completely. For example, take a bunch of kids and put them in a classroom and ask them to study abstract knowledge. And some will be interested in abstract knowledge and good at it, good in sitting still, and some will just not. Mm-hmm. And the modern idea is that, oh, well, there's a problem with those who are not, and so we should give them drugs, or we should, they're a problem, we should chastise them, or this, that. It's like, oh, okay, but what about the other natures? What about the nature of getting out there in the world and feeling the earth and feeling the sun and understanding plants and animals? Can you learn that in the book? Maybe, if the book is written by someone else with that nature. Maybe not. There's a certain kind of knowledge in that, and there's a certain kind of practicality in that. How about the knowledge of how to take care of plants and animals, how to have them be protected, right? Are you telling me that we can survive as a culture, as a society, as a civilization without doing that? No, absolutely not. You have to have people of that nature, even if that's not your nature. Even if your nature is you put me on a farm, I don't know what I would do. I would probably end up cutting my hand off with an axe before the first day is over. You can say that. If that's your nature, okay. But you can still appreciate it. I'm glad someone somewhere is raising crops and protecting cows so we can all offer these things to Krishna and eat. It's true. It's a natural interdependence. One of the unfortunate aspects of modern society is that it creates a sense of independence. We don't know where our food comes from. We don't actually understand how arts and crafts and all these things plug in. We don't appreciate science. We don't appreciate the austerity it takes to actually guide other people. We don't appreciate how all these different things have to be guided by those who are the most renounced, who are the most independent of material comfort. That's what makes them Brahmanas, not just that they like knowledge. It's their renunciation and their orientation toward the Supreme. Ultimately, Varnashram culture means a culture of respecting Brahmins and respecting other people. You appreciate the different qualities of people. You appreciate how they plug in, how we're dependent on all of them. In a little village or something, even within one Varna, to speak of cross Varnas, you'll have somebody who's like, okay, on our plot of land, we have carrots. And over there, you have, pumpkins. And that land is good for pumpkins, and this is good for carrots. And I'll trade you carrots for pumpkins. Because I don't want to just eat carrots for the rest of my life, and I can't. Get scurvy and die. I have to have all these other things, so I'm dependent. And if you don't have a good relationship with the pumpkin person, you're never going to eat pumpkins again because they're going to have a problem with you. Or you're not going to find a market for your carrots, so you have to get along. And that's what material culture is you learn how to get along and how to be interdependent and how to plug in and have smooth social intercourse, right? And ultimately, it means we recognize that all these things, including smooth social intercourse, are possible when we are guided by those who are the most renounced, the most detached. They don't need to have fame, name, money, sex, luxury. That quality of theirs means they cannot be bought or sold. That quality of theirs, in conjunction with their deep learning, means that they're actually worthy of listening to. And the kshatriyas, the leaders of society, have to be guided by such persons. And those persons are the most spiritually advanced. They're the ones who make the most time for spiritual practice, who are the most in touch with Shastra, who are the most indifferent to material things. That whole culture, therefore, becomes spiritualized. Because even if you're not super into God and super into spiritual life, at least you recognize, I have a pretty good material life, and it's because I'm in this culture that's guided by these spiritual people. That's what Varnashram culture looked like when it was intact, right? That's what it means to have Brahmins at the top. It's a wisdom culture. And even if you're not ready in this life to fully surrender, you would have some connection because you appreciate the spiritual people and they're there. They're part of culture. We see how they offer what they're offering. And one is regulated according to that higher instruction. The Shudras are regulated, right? What we find now is like, let's say you're good at some art or craft. Let's say you're like great at acting. Great, we need to have theatrical arts. It's a beautiful thing. And if you plug into something and in that, like maybe you make a living doing it, probably you don't, because there's the, you know,
It's hard.
it's hard. And if you do and you make millions and millions of dollars, do you have any guidance on what to do with that money? Do you have any guidance on what to do with all that, you know, what's coming back? No. There's not guided at all. What we find is that people pollute and destroy themselves because they're actually not regulated. They don't know how to be regulated. There's no guidance on how to like naturally do what they do, get what they get from the results of that, and just have a healthy life with boundaries. It's just like this weird, crazy idea that if I just had that, if I lived like them, then I'd be happy. No. The celebrities, the sports people who are, you know, scoring touchdowns, that they're not necessarily happier. They have to deal with the fact that they're not regulated. They have no spiritual guidance unless they do, you know, as an exception to the rule. So it also, Varnashram culture means also regulating oneself according to higher instruction. That this is your quota. You deserve and earn this much to get this much back. Don't try to do so much more. Don't try to get more. Don't misapply what you get back in your wealth, right? Shudras are guided on how to not abuse wealth so they don't destroy their own bodies and society, you know, because they're not necessarily inclined to understand how to do that. They have to have some support in doing that, right? If your nature is you can't figure out how to like take care of an entire society and where you plug in, you're not a Brahmin, you can't understand all that. You should be guided by someone who is. That's what Varnashram ultimately means, is that we have a wisdom culture. We respect our elders. We respect those with more experience. We respect our guides, our gurus, our teachers. We respect Brahmins, those who are more spiritually advanced. And so there's a lot you can say about that. You know, I just talked about Shudras. You can talk about Vaishyas. What happens to an unregulated marketplace? You know, what are the examples of capitalism when it's not regulated? Do market forces regulate themselves? I would argue historically, no. There has to be some way in which they have to be regulated. Otherwise, they become like cancer cells, just taking more and more and more. You know, there has to be like seatbelts for cars and like oversight for business practices. Otherwise, if there's no morality, no oversight, no kshatriyas guiding it just spirals. Kshatriyas also have to be guided, and Brahmins are ultimately guided by Shastra and each other. So there's this accountability mutually. It's a science. There's a lot you can say about it, but short form, we learn interdependence. We learn respect for the contributions of others, even if we don't have the qualities of that varna or that varna or that ashram or that ashram. It's interdependence, and it's mutual appreciation, mutual trust, mutual care, and ultimately we learn guidance, especially from those who are more advanced, especially from those who are more advanced spiritually. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes, sorry, Eleanor was talking to me.
All good.
Yes, sorry.
Big topic.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate, I mean, just in the first, or it's in the verse that ultimately all orders of life are to please the personality of Godhead, right? All orders of life are meant to please Krishna. And then you said the best purpose of our duties is to please and satisfy the Lord. And I was thinking about all the ways in which we try to, like that people pleasing happens, you know, for me and just my own spiritual healing journey and managing and moving through codependency and like this. And it's like, it's just misplaced.
Service attitude.
Yeah. It's really interesting. And everyone is part and parcel of Krishna. And so in serving others, it is serving Krishna. However, if the intention is to really try to serve the desires of that, the material desires of that person, then it is misplaced.
Yes. Prabhupada gives the example of like Gandhi did all this selfless service for his country, and he was just killed for it.
Yeah.
You never actually satisfy everybody.
Right.
You never satisfy anybody if your intention is completely material. You know, people can be like, oh, if I just had this kind of partner, and then oh, you get that partner, and you like you like say you marry, and then you're dedicated to them. Is that a guarantee that you're going to satisfy them completely? Where was I hearing? We were listening to a class last night, and what's his name?
Dayal.
Dali Garanga Prabhu.
Yeah.
He was saying it's the highest form of illusion to tell somebody that actually I can be everything for you, right? It's actually
Or you are my everything.
you are my everything. Or I'm your everything. I can actually hold that space. No, we can't.
Yeah.
Nobody can for us either. That's actually not truth, and therefore it creates problems. It's like I have a responsibility. We have so many responsibilities to fulfill, and we're not trying to shirk them. And we just talked about some of those responsibilities. But ultimately, our ultimate responsibility is to God, and our ultimate responsibility to other people is to deal with them as a part and parcel of God, right? So if we detach them from that thing and say, no, I can be everything for you, that's not actually service for either them or for ourselves. And that's when people pleasing and other things or exploitation can come about, because we're then artificially separating apart from the whole.
Right.
And then our intentions in service are mixed at best. So, yeah, I'm caring, but actually I'm caring so I can look good. Actually, I'm caring so I can be the man.
Right.
I'm caring so I can, fulfill my identity as the maintainer of this person. I'm caring so I can go on, supporting my internal God project of making myself the supreme enjoyer and controller in one way or another, either piously by being nice and following the rules and being loyal and dedicated, or impiously by just flat out stealing and butchering.
Yeah.
But one way or another, it's not actually lined up as long as we don't have Krishna in the middle. And when we do, it's actually very natural. It's not such a complicated, it's not a religious thing. It's not like a technical thing. It's a very natural thing in which then the service flows. I mean, we deal with other people. We are part of the world. We are husbands, wives, and daughters, and sons, and sisters, and brothers, and citizens, and elderly, and whatever. All those things flow.
Yeah. Jai.
Jai, more reflections? Justin.
Good morning. Just to follow up on the people pleasing, and it's also sometimes you just do things out of goodness, right? But we have to understand that goodness is also mode of material nature, and we do want to transcend that. And that conditioned goodness can be just as hurtful as mode of passion or mode of ignorance. So I just wanted to interject that.
Yeah, that's a more subtle point. Like we don't want to be in we can see the effects of being in tamas, and we can see the effects of being in rajas. But if you just stick to sattva, the material mode of sattva, it's also hurtful. So like, let's say you go to a yoga class, or there's like a yoga studio or yoga culture where they teach you how to be in sattva. Yoga asana, yoga pranayama is terrific at orienting the body and mind into sattva. But if there's no indication at all of the reason why yoga is there, what the context of all that is, it only serves temporarily, right? It serves the body and mind, but it doesn't actually take you all the way. It's again detaching something from the whole. It's cultural appropriation, or it's imperfect knowledge. It's like, I'll take this is the asana thing because it makes me have a nice butt. I have good lung capacity. I look good. I feel good. I feel free from stress. And it's like, that's great. Those are all side effects of practicing yoga. And that's not what it was created for, primarily. And a culture that's into like mindfulness and peace and getting along and truth, if that's like its focus without understanding the purpose of truth, the purpose of mindfulness, the purpose of peace, it will also be a form of violence. Prabhupada said violence ultimately means withholding higher truth. If you know spiritual truth and you withhold it, then you're practicing violence intentionally. And if you don't know, then you're practicing it unintentionally. There's a way in which we don't want to just be satisfied with a well-decorated prison cell, a comfortable prison cell. We want to get out of prison. And it may not be possible to address that directly in all of our social interactions, but if our intention, our knowledge, and our awareness is there, then we can be guided moment to moment what to do, what to say. But if we are convinced that the goal of life is just to be comfortable and peaceful and have the ability to sit straight on the floor with folded legs without lower back pain, then we're cheating ourselves of the perfection of yoga, to quote one of Prabhupada's excellent books.
Right, because even if you become perfect in just meditation, but meditation without purpose, you just are basically disconnecting from actual reality in all regards, not just in a physical, material sense, but also a spiritual sense. So meditation is a good
impersonal meditation on a void for some temporary mental satisfaction of peace and comfort, and it doesn't actually satisfy the self at all.
Right. Yep.
There's no purpose. There's no purposefulness in such a life. And if one says, well, at least I'm doing the right thing, well, okay. But how is that satisfying? Philosophically, it's satisfying because that right thing was ordained by someone who actually knows what's right. It feels satisfying because the supreme enjoyer is enjoying, even indirectly. We can't independently create some satisfying situation. Well, at least I'm peaceful. It's like, okay, you don't even know what you are. So,
right.
Yeah. But it's still better. It's a lot better than living in Rajas or Tamas, for sure. And it's the best place to orient your attachment to the modes. If you can live a sattvic life, that's the best way to do it. Because when you're practicing bhakti, you're trying to be in the transcendental platform, but when you fall from transcendence, you're going to fall back to whatever your acquired modes of nature are. So if your acquired modes of nature are sattva, your spiritual fall down will be going to a yoga class and doing asanas and not thinking of Krishna. A spiritual fall down of someone in Rajas is working their butt off to make a bunch of money and being obsessed with the next great accomplishment. Spiritual fall down of someone in Tamas is shooting up heroin or something awful. Definitely you want to have that safety net in sattva. And it's still just a safety net. It's not actually the tightrope of spiritual life.
Jai. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Anything else? Can be a one-sentence reflection.
You said our identities become clear from the inside out. And
yeah.
I think that's kind of a summation of like what we were just talking about, is that it comes down to the intention, right? Like where's our focus and what's our intention?
Yeah, and if our focus and intention is to be of service, and we're acknowledging and trying to orient to higher power, however we understand, then the next step will be illuminated, all the way down to whatever we need, including occupationally, relationally, financially, health-wise. Yeah.
Pure intention is everything.
What's that?
Being intentional, pure intention is everything.
Yeah.
I was thinking about, when you're like 16 or 17 and the world is your oyster, you got to figure out your career the rest of your life.
Right.
You got to go to college. And I was like, man, there was at least for me, I was thinking, back then it was like, you could be anybody you want. Like, I could be anything. Like, I have to pick the thing I'm going to be the rest of my life now. And it's now I'm like, today at least, I was like, it's less about being whatever you want, whoever you want to be. It's like, at least we have the opportunity to just be ourselves. That's the goal, is like you said, connect to Krishna and then find what you're naturally, intuitionally, this is what I'm meant to be doing. It's not this I can be whatever I want. It's no, I can just be myself. And that's the beauty. It's it's not, I can be anybody. It's oh no, I can be
me.
There's a lot of judgments around that. People judge their kids that you should go to this school, not that school. People judge. I mean, look.
So bad. It's really bad. It's heartbreaking.
it's there's a lot of judgment. I mean, in the you could look at society and how it became normal, not normal, like necessary to have a two-income household, right? It's one thing to say that women should have the right to go to work. Absolutely, occupationally they should. It's another thing to say, now we've created a society where if you don't have a two-income household, forget it. You have to run so hard just to stand still, right? And so, in other words, being a housewife or a house husband is completely looked down on. There's no respect for it at all. What if that's your nature? What if your nature is like, I feel occupationally satisfied being the heart of a household? Are we saying that's not an important part of society? That's not worth honoring? That's an atrocious value system. So there's so many different ways in which there's really weird ideas, or this is false idea that I can be anything. And it's like, yeah, but you'd only be so happy doing something that's so different than what you're good at, you know? So just try to understand yourself first, and don't try and take it as an abstract thing of like, well, this is all real. What do I feel like throw a dart at a dartboard? I'll just be that today, or what's better in an abstraction?
Yeah, right. It's like right when you have no guidance spiritually. It's like, oh, I'm just gonna pick the thing that's most materially satisfying, right?
Successful.
Yeah, I guess to be a doctor,
Yeah.
they get a lot of respect. Like,
And then
right.
pay off my debt quicker. And,
Doctor and a lawyer.
right.
yeah.
Which we need those.
We
But
do.
If you're not naturally inclined to it, you're gonna be incredibly suffering or jaded or whatever. It's like,
Yeah. So, lots you could say about that.
yeah.
All right.
Amazing.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
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 Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Hare Ram.
Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. All right. Have a great day, everyone.